You're listening to Trek FM.
Hello and welcome from There to Here, Trek FM's 50th Anniversary Rewatch, in which we look back at all 729 episodes from Enterprise to Star Trek Beyond and everything in between. I'm Lee Hutchison, your host for today's episode, and today I'm joined by Zach. How are you, Zach?
Doing great, Lee. Looking forward to talking about some more Star Trek today.
Yeah, we've got a couple of exciting episodes to talk about today, and we'll be starting with Coda. Catherine Janeway performs an amazing trick at the talent show, but all goes downhill from there when she dies repeatedly and then ends up facing her father as she stands on the brink of going into the afterlife. Well, that's quite a hefty plot description there. What do you think of Coda?
I think this episode is terrible. I don't like this episode at all. I feel like, like we were talking about yesterday with Alter Ego, it's like the worst Voyager at its worst, right? It copies and pastes other Star Trek stories and tries to mix them together and doesn't do as well. There's a little bit of cause and effect in here. There's a little bit of the next phase. There's a little, just TNG light. That's what people criticize Voyager for being. And this episode is like, why? I don't know. It didn't connect with me at all. I just found it a frustrating episode to watch. I didn't much like it.
I'm the same. Like, I always remembered as a kid kind of enjoying it. I remember seeing it for the first time, and it's a very odd episode because I read up that they had these three different ideas in their head that, Janeway meeting like a family member, Janeway like on the brink of death, and them trapped in this time loop, and they've thrown them all in together. And when I was watching the episode the other day, like for easily the first time in maybe 10 years, I was like, what is this like time loop like in the first half got to do with the second part of the episode? Like it's really weirdly put together. And if I quite like Janeway, but if you imagine if you hated Janeway, you treated to her being violently strangled to death, then her being gassed to death by a sadistic doctor. It's really like quite graphic in how they dispose of Janeway, not once but twice. It's just a really weird episode. Like, you think it's going to be about this time loop. That's for like 15 minutes. Then Janeway's dead. That's like 10 minutes. And then Janeway's kicking around with her old man for 15 minutes. It's like, I don't get it. Like, what?
Yeah, it's like this episode feels like the second draft of a writer's room meeting. Like they needed to like refine it and like drop one of the stories and make the other two stories fit together better. It's so weird. Janeway and her dad, that's weird too. And to nitpick, right? So he died like 15 years ago. I kind of assumed he was wearing like an old Starfleet uniform, but he has the new Voyager com badge on. Like, what are you doing?
Like my OCD was going nuts.
Like, I know we're nitpicking, but when you're not enjoying the episode, you start looking for stuff like that, and it's like, oh. I mean, when Riker was on in Death Wish, he had the right com badge on, and in fact, it would have made more sense if he had the Voyager com badge on, but no, he had the old one. But anyway, nitpicking aside, that's the least of these episode's problems. And that alien, he just, at the end, he's such like a bad comic book villain. He's like, one day, Janeway, you will be part of my matrix. Ha 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 ha.
And you'll fulfill me for the rest of my life. Whoa. It's
and then we get a great one-liner. Go back to hell.
I'm sure like someone like Matt Rushing or someone could inform us all a bit better, but I'm pretty sure like they took a lot of inspiration from like a Janeway book at the time that kind of touched upon like her father had drowned, and they took quite a lot of literary references from some of the Star Trek canon. So that's a plus for people that are into the books, I guess. Mm-hmm. But it just didn't do much for me at all. Even the moment that really annoyed me when they were having like her funeral, like her mass. There's barely anyone there. Like, the captain's dead, and you're lucky if you've got, like, 3 members of staff talking and a bunch of extras just standing around looking glum and indifferent. It's moments like that take you out, that it feels so cheap and, a total disrespect to the character that this is their captain, and they're like, yeah, okay, yeah, I'll pop along.
It's like, well, I got my holodeck time is this afternoon. I can't make it down to the mess hall. Like, I'm glad you brought up her funeral because you're right. First of all, it's very empty. You think that what else does everyone have to do with this time? The captain is dead. And then you think about, like, could we have seen some, like, more recurring characters around? Like, what's Vorik up to? What's Ensign Wildman, who apparently she's like, after she has Naomi, she's like in 2 episodes. And then, of course, one of my favorite Voyager nitpicks, and this is what we do in these episodes we don't like, right? Where is Lieutenant Carey? Did they think they killed him off? Because I really think at some point they thought they killed him off, because he was in a lot of episodes of season 1. And then he was always in, like, flashbacks or time travel. Like, he was in Relativity. He was in Fury, like, whenever they go back in time. And then I think they realized, oh, we did kill him off. He's still around. So they bring him back, and then, well, no spoilers, but where is he?
I think he's working on his ship in the bottle at this point. That he was really trying to get, like, the bow of the ship, and he's like, I can't move right now. He was such a slow process that he was like, I can't make the funeral. I'm so sorry. He'll probably watch it on, like, a meeting with Neelix or Breakfast with Neelix, whatever his TV show is.
Neelix.
That's the one. Yeah, they'll have an episode dedicated to that, like Janeway's best moments.
I know that was kind of a tangent, but I mean that's just, it's frustrating when episodes, like you say, you don't enjoy them, and you're sitting there and you're like, this that. You start thinking about ways it could be better, and we're just kind of venting our frustration here, because there are some good. They could have gone somewhere with any of these plots. They got, like, Janeway thinks she's dead. She sees someone who looks like her father. Like, the whole episode could have been that, or stick to your time loop. I don't care if it's a repeat of cause and effect. Just stick to something. But their schizophrenic nature of this episode really undermined it. Yeah.
Yeah, not the best.
No.
So, maybe moving on from one of the worst to one of my favourites of the amazing Season 5 of Deep Space Nine, for the uniform. Sisko is on the hunt for Michael Eddington, but is things getting a bit too personal? And how much do the captain and the crew know about Les Mis? So, what did you make of For the Uniform?
I really enjoyed For the Uniform. I got to do For the Cause on From There to Here a while back, and the Eddington subplot is so interesting to me, because he's not like he's just a complicated guy. He's just a normal guy. He's not some megalomaniac with delusions of grandeur. Well, I guess he does kind of have delusions of grandeur, but still, he's just a normal guy who decides to go against Starfleet, and then him and Sisko have this personal relationship, and that's what drives this episode. Sisko, I mean, he's frustrated. He's talking to Dax. He's like, he beat me. He's just a man. He's not a changeling. No. Does he have 9 lifetimes of experience? No. And he's so frustrated because this normal guy beat him. And as for Les Mis, like, this was my first exposure to Les Mis when I saw it back in the day. And some of many things in Star Trek is my first exposure to Sherlock Holmes or Les Mis. So like I saw this episode before I even saw or any kind of play or movie of Les Mis. So it was very insightful to me.
I know, I was a bit gutted when they didn't break into a rendition of One Day More with Avery Brooks playing Gervais. I was gutted. That could have been a great moment, something really original.
Brooks would have definitely been a better singer than Russell Crowe.
That's another discussion. I don't personally mind Russell Crowe in that episode, but like, it's things like that I always love Nick Meyer for when he brings that into Star Trek with the literary references, and I think it really works here in this episode. It really ties in so well, and the parallels are uncanny, and I think it's one of these episodes that it pays off what's come before with, as you're saying, For the Cause, and it puts Sisko in that kind of corner that something like In the Pale Moonlight to come in a year's time doesn't seem too inconceivable. And even things like, once again, the Cardassians are on the end of a bloody nose, and how much more can they take? Everyone's kind of going after them. I wouldn't be surprised if they snap soon and make a very, very rash decision.
There's no way to know.
Tune in tomorrow. And I love the introduction for the one and only time of the new holographic visual interface.
Boy.
I kind of like it. It's okay, but it just doesn't work.
It's the kind of thing, and I get why they did it, right? They didn't want to just have view screen back and forth. They wanted to have some more of a physical presence, because this episode relies so much on Sisko versus Eddington, and they didn't want to just be all through view screen. So but introducing this, it's so like shoehorned in, where it's like, oh, thanks for installing a new holographic generator, Chief. And then even Eddington's like, oh, I like this new holographic generator. I'm glad we got our hands on one. It's just, they go out of their way to mention it. Thankfully, they realized it didn't work and they dropped it. I believe it's in one more episode after this.
I think so, yeah.
But then they just kind of let it go, and yeah, it's awkward. And I prefer looking at a screen than turning my chair around and looking in the corner.
I think if there was like a way to do it, like similar to maybe what they do with Shinzon and Star Trek Nemesis, where there's a bit of like distortion or something like that, I think it could have been an interesting idea, but the execution and budget just don't really lend itself too well to this episode in that respect. But there's so many cool moments going on, like Sisko being pushed to the edge, and one of my favorite moments where Odo throws just some shade that I hope you reminded Starfleet headquarters that Michael Eddington was brought in because they didn't trust me, and Sisko's like, no, I didn't mention it. I'd appreciate it if you did.
Yeah.
And he's just like totally blank that Sisko's so angry and self-obsessed. He's not even going to indulge Odo's comment.
Right. Mic drop from Odo there. It's so true, right? I mean, this is Starfleet's own fault. They put this guy here because they didn't trust Odo, and look at the trouble he wrought. And then, at the end, Sisko, like, being hardcore. Like, Sisko does some hardcore things, and as you said earlier, Lee, that this lays the groundwork for what he would go on to do in The Pale Moonlight. And it's bad when he's like, fire, and Worf's like, are you sure, sir? Worf is always itching to fire on something, and he's like hesitating, and wow, that's hardcore action by Sisko, but drastic times call for drastic measures.
Yeah, and another moment I love as well is that it's the parallels between, like, it's almost like a submarine movie again that we kind of saw with Wrath of Khan, where you've got the ship, and like even the technical terms I sometimes love, where they're talking about the rudders and pulling things around, and like it feels like a living, breathing ship that needs care and attention, and people need to be professionals to run it. Even getting like Nog to communicate around the ship, and it's a really nice touch to make it grounds the Defiant and Deep Space Nine in a kind of reality where things aren't easily fixed. And they could easily have just had it, the Defiant's going to go out and save the day, but they really make the Defiant work for its success.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you mentioned Nick Meyer. He's the guy that like wanted, to have people doing things in Star Trek 2. Like, we're taking the grates off the torpedo tubes, and that's the vibe you get here. Obviously, the Defiant gets crippled through, Eddington's programming, and that's a plot device. But you're right; it makes the ship feel so much more alive. And the computer is not doing as much as it usually does. So you got crew members being like adjusting 0.3 degrees and phaser alignment and increase the impulse power, and you got all these people shouting things, and you feel like, if I was on a real spaceship, like, this is the way it would be. It wouldn't just be people chilling out on on the Marriott lounge on the Enterprise D bridge, as people say, pushing buttons, right? People would be like, on task, having to be focused on what they're doing, and that really invests you into like the stress of the situation.
Absolutely. So I think that brings us to the end of our 2 episodes, unless you've got anything else to add.
No, I'm just glad that this episode was so good it balanced out how bad the Voyager one.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we may not have got violent murder, death, but we got some kind of planet-wide genocide. Yeah. So just Gene Roddenberry's vision is alive and kicking in 1997.
Absolutely.
So Zach, if people want to get in touch with you and tell you how wrong you are about Coda and talk to you about Les Mis, where can people find you?
I would look, if people love Coda, please let us know. I'd be very interested to know. I bet Brandon Shea Matala likes Coda. Just throwing him out there. Yeah. But yes, please let me know it. So you can find me every week here on Trek FM on Standard Orbit, our original series podcast. I am in the Babel Conference as well, so let us know in the Babel Conference about these episodes. Me personally, I'm on Twitter at MooreOnZach. That's MooreOnZach, and I'm also the host of my own podcast, Always Hold On to Smallville, where we talk about each and every episode of that young Superman show. What about you, Lee?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Lee_Nostromo, and you can find me at my Star Trek Twitter feed of Star Trek VHS, and you can find me on my own podcast, The Senate Floor, where I talk with Matt Hansen and Tristan Riddell about all things geek and film culture and anything in between. So yeah, find us there. So hopefully you can join me tomorrow for some exciting episode of Voyager and Deep Space Nine. So things are going to start to get better and better, I think. And that'll be us for today. Live long and prosper.